Hello everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Ratliff Mandolins weekly production diary. You are watching me put stain on mandolin number 2 in the batch. It's actually the third one that we've got stained on, but in the batch numbers it's number 2. This mandolin's going to a nice fellow in New York State when we get done with it, and he wanted a solid brown, and we discussed a mandolin number 1217, which seems to be the benchmark mandolin for the last several calls that I've had on a solid mandolin color brown. You can search it out on the YouTube search engine, just type in Ratliff Mandolins 1217 and you'll get a video on that mandolin. It's a really pretty light brown, and I wanted to get kind of close to that color with just a little bit more chocolate to it, so you can see at some point here in this video footage you'll see me putting just a slightly darker stain over top of what I've already put on, and what I come up with I think is just a very nice rich light chocolate color, and it's really pretty. Now that stain that I used is min wax, and they recommend that you wait 24 hours before you put a top coat on. So basically I am done at this point. I'm going to hang it on the wall and then come back and start my clear coats on it tomorrow, and that frees up the rest of the day for other things. And some of the other things that I do have on the list to do this week are basically move on to the next mandolin and try to get stain on it, and ship out mandolin number 10, which we finished up last week. It needs to be shipped to its customer. It was sold to a fella through Elderly Instruments, so I'm going to send it to Elderly Instruments, and I need to call them and kind of let them know it's on its way. Other than that, we're just going to move on with the batch, trying to get stain and finish on the 7 mandolins in this batch that we haven't got stain on yet. These gloves are so aggravating to get off. Okay, it is time to move on to the next project, and the next project will be mandolin number 3, which is mostly sanded down to 100 grit, ready to be sanded with the finer grit. Number 3 is the one that's going to have, it has a tortoiseshell binding, and it is going to have a cream top, and most importantly to us right now, it's going to have a cream peghead face. So we want to put the logo in, the name Ratliff, but white against cream is not going to show up very good, and if we inlay it with pearl, that's not going to show up very good. So we're going to inlay it with abalone. Now I have the stickers, I have pearl names cut, but I don't have any abalone names cut, so we're going to have to cut an abalone logo. And we're going to do that right here in this corner. I have a board screwed to the bench with a little hole in it, and that's where we saw this out with this fret saw, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. I've got a light here that can stretch all the way over and get right down on top of the work area. And what else do I have here? I have a whole portfolio of inlay patterns and designs and ideas. Collected that over a lifetime. And we have some inlay that's pre-cut that I have just in the past not used. I've got a thing full of tools here, special little tools that you use to hold the pearl if you want to file it and clean it up and everything, and we'll probably get to some of that in this job. I have all sorts of inlay material. I've got some strips of aluminum and brass and sterling silver binding, some really thin strips of ebony, tagua nut that you inlay with sometimes, so I've got all kinds of inlay material. I've got some pearl. I have dust to use if you're going to have a black peg head, and I have a box of what's left over from a pound that I bought 30 years ago of abalone. And so that's what we're going to use on this mandolin here, because the abalone has a little bit of color and it will stand out against the cream better than basically anything else that I could use. Here's a little bit better look at all the stuff I've stashed away over the years. This is a fleur-de-lis that we're going to put in a mandolin here in the next batch or two. Here's a pick guard that I did several mandolins ago. A mandolin back that I inlaid. You might remember this this pattern here that went in the Mandocello last year. Oh, I've stored all kinds of stuff. Here's just a thing on gunstock carbon with a whole bunch of patterns. I don't throw anything away. Some original stuff, some original artwork for mandolin peg heads, and just some ideas that I've penciled out. And let's see, the names. Whole bunch of names. So we're going to cut one of these out, glue it to the abalone that we choose, and then we're going to saw that pattern out. Yeah, that one will be big enough. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece of abalone and I'm going to cut this name out. I'm going to glue it with super glue to this piece of abalone. Then we'll cut it with the saw. We'll cut down to the point of where I'm afraid that I'm going to break it, because this stuff is really fragile. And then once I've got it blocked down there to where I'm starting to be afraid of it, I will glue it to a piece of wood, and that is usually just leftover side wood that's too short to bend sides out of. And I'll save that stuff for this job, and that will be glued right there. And then I've got a place to hold it, and it just makes it a lot more supported, and you don't break as many pieces that way. So we're going to do that now. There we go. It doesn't take long for that super glue to dry, and we can almost immediately begin work. Now the R and the Ratliff have been cut out roughly, the outline, and we just need to add the detail. We're going to glue this R right here, and we're going to glue this Ratliff right here, and we'll use wood glue so that after we're done it's all supported, and we'll just pierce these holes and saw that out to the appropriate shape. Then we'll just soak it in water. After an hour or two, that wood glue will soften up and this part will fall off, and we'll be able to use it. That's the procedure. So we're going to glue this right now with wood glue to these pieces, and then walk off and leave them and do something else. And that something else will be the brown mandolin that we stained. It's dry enough now that we can put the decal logo on its peg head and start its lacquer build coats. And now I'll shoot some bill coats, probably sealer coat and 3 bill coats, and then that'll be all we can do to that today, and it will be ready for a 220 grit sanding tomorrow and another coat of finish. But first 3 today. So I now have 1 coat of lacquer on the brown mandolin, and I think this logo here is probably dry enough that we can proceed with it. So I'll tell you the procedure from here on out. I went to my local dentist and asked him, what do you do with all your drill bits? And he said, oh, I'll give you a bunch of them. After they're used, they throw them away. And so I have a bunch of dentist drill bits, and they're a lot smaller than just the regular drill bits that you can buy. So now we're going to put this drill bit in the drill press, and we're just going to go down in these holes, like the inside of that F, right up here where we can access these spots right here, inside this T right here, and inside this A, and inside this R, and we're just going to drill a hole down through that so that we can insert the little tiny blade from the jeweler's saw, and that way we can hold it here and saw in there. So that's what we're going to do. Put this in the drill press, drill us some holes. And now I'm going to take my pearl cutting saw, take it loose at the bottom, free the bottom part of that blade up, thread it through each one of those holes, put everything back together so that this thing will just be dangling on the saw blade, and saw out whatever on the inside I want to saw out, move to the next hole, to the next hole, to the next hole on both pieces, until I've got the entire name cut out. This name has actually 7 places it needs to be touched. The Ratliff, and then the R has the one big thing in the middle. So we're going to do this 7 more times, and then we'll have something that we can work with. Okay, put these together and we have a nice abalone name. I'm going to fill this little tray with water, pitch those right down in there, and by tomorrow they will soak themselves off and we can inlay them. After soaking in water all night, the abalone name is ready to come off of the backing board. It will just slide right off right here. We're going to put it off on this cloth so that it'll dry. Just look right there. Didn't have to work that at all. It just slid right off. we go. Let's arrange them a little bit more like you'll see them in the peg head. Now I will inlay that in mandolin number 3 today, but first I need to do my in-between coat sanding on mandolin number 2, the brown mandolin that we shot our bill coats on yesterday. So I'm going to do that first, and then we'll inlay this name. It's the end of the day on Wednesday, and I made some progress today. Number 2 has had another coat of finish. It's been sanded off and had another coat of finish put on it. Number 3 here, I inlaid the logo and put frets in it, although I haven't actually cleaned the ends up, but it's got all the frets in it. So, made some progress today. And now I'm going to share with you a story that has absolutely nothing to do with mandolins, but it is a childhood story that has a little bit to do with woodworking. My dad worked for the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. We moved around a lot when I was a kid, and between the ages of 10 and 13 we lived in Panama. And so my dad, being a good old country boy, he was thrilled to bits to live in this exotic, exciting place. And when he wasn't working, we'd get out and ride around and look at things. And I've seen so many different things in Panama that I can remember. A black leopard. We saw a black leopard one night, and I saw an anteater and big snakes, several big old snakes, trees with square trunks. Google it, actually. Not round trees. There are a species of trees down there that is not round. They are square, and by golly, they are indeed square. You can, like I said, you can Google it and see. So we saw all kinds of stuff. When he wasn't working, he'd load us up in the car and we'd go riding around out in Panama, away from the American zone. And on one trip he stopped at a local roadside stand, and there was a guy there with basically a pocket knife carving these things right here. And he bought this guy, and I know that this guy's been here on this bench for about a year now, and I am sure some of you sharp-eyed guys have noticed this carving and wondered about it. And so the story is that my dad bought this that day, and we brought it back when we come back to live in Tennessee. And so about a year ago, well, my dad died about 4 or 5 years ago. He had Alzheimer's, and it wasn't long after that before my mom was diagnosed with it. And she's kind of at that stage right now where she can remember 40 years ago, but she doesn't remember 5 minutes ago. So about a year ago, I was up at the visiting her, and I said, "Mom, you remember that wooden statue that Daddy bought down in Panama?" "Oh yeah, yeah." "Do you still have it?" "Well, it's probably around here somewhere." So we looked for probably 2 or 2.5 hours. I tore apart every shelf, every closet, every cabinet, looked in every corner and cubby hole and in the basement. We looked all over. In the last place that I decided last place I thought of to look at was in the back of the hall closet there, where right beside the front door, you know, the little closet that they have there for you to hang your coats on in the winter time and stuff. And stuck in the very back of that closet, here was this guy. So I said, "Can I have him?" And she said, "Yeah." And I thought, I'll bring him home, and maybe one day I'll carve, you know, I'll try my hand at carving that guy. And so that's where he sat for a year. Now, yesterday, I had a bunch of errands to run in town, and I'll talk about some of them in just a minute, actually related to mandolin work. But one of the things that I had on my list of things to do was go up at Mom's house, and she's got an apple tree that's in. They're ready to pick the apples, and we got a batch of apples and visited with Mom. And so I'm sitting there in the living room, and basically right there on the floor, sitting at the with another little ceramic piece she's got. What's that? I said, I thought there was only one. And she said, oh yeah, there's only one. Right there it is. Where did you find it at? Oh, I don't know. It's been there for a while. Well, it hasn't been, but obviously Daddy bought two that day. And but what I can't figure out is where was this one when we tore the house down. And I found this one in the last place that I looked at. I don't know where this one was at the time. So anyway, I was telling her, I said, you remember there's actually two? No, is there? And yeah, and I told her about me and her going through the house last year, and so she said, well, you kind of need to keep the pair together, don't you? And I said, well, I'd love to have it. And she said, well, you can have it. So now, from here on out, for those of you who are paying close attention, you'll see not one but two of these guys on this bench right here. And who knows, maybe I'll carve one or both of those guys one of these days, just to see if I can, because obviously the workmanship is magnificent on these things. So there's that story. Now let me get back to mandolins, and I'll tell you what all it's Friday afternoon, and I'll tell you what all we got accomplished this week on the mandolins. I did indeed get the final coats of finish on mandolin number 2. That's the brown one with the black binding. Mandolin number 3, we got the inlay in, the abalone logo, and I put frets in it. And one of those jobs or one of those errands I was running in town yesterday was to find the color for the paint, because like I said, we're going to have a cream top or peghead face and peghead face, and I didn't have the stuff to do that with, so I went to town yesterday and I actually bought 2 cans of spray paint that will hopefully be compatible with the lacquer overcoats, and there were 2 in the entire section that sort of struck me as being possible acceptable colors. This one is ivory, it says, and this one has the fancy exotic name of vintage lace. So I'm going to spend next week doing some test shooting on boards and trying to shoot the lacquer over coat and seeing how all of that works out, and try to pick out which color would be best for mandolin number 3. And earlier in this video I think I mentioned trying to ship out mandolin number 10. Mandolin number 10 has been sold through Elderly Instruments in Lansing, Michigan, and I need to talk to them and get some purchase order numbers straightened out and stuff before I can send them the mandolin and everything, and I haven't been able to get anybody to return a call yet. So the number 10 is still here. Hopefully I'll give them another shot this afternoon and see if I can get a hold of somebody and straighten out the paperwork stuff and get that one on its way maybe next week. Let me remind you that there's going to be some bonus footage for this episode. This episode is episode number 103, and I'm going to post another bonus footage video, and it'll just be listed as bonus footage episode number 103, I guess. Next week we're going to, of course, get the cream colored mandolin on the road, I hope. And also on the job jar list will be, now that number 2 is hanging in the and done and finished, we'll pick up on mandolin number 1, which is the green mandolin, and hopefully we will get strings and stuff on that, and you can see and hear the green mandolin completed next week as well. And so hopefully you'll come back and see us next week. on the next episode of the Ratliff Mandolins Weekly Production Diary. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and word of mouth, if you could tell any of your friends about this video series, I would certainly appreciate it. And please leave me a comment, because I always appreciate the comments, and it lets me know that people are being engaged and all that sort of stuff, and I really appreciate them. And that's about it. I'll see you next week.